Today, we will be discussing about the early Christian art sarcophagi comparing with the late Roman sarcophagus. We will focus on two Christian sarcophagi, sarcophagus of Junius Bassus and Santa Maria Antiqua sarcophagus. First of all, the beginnings of Christian art can be traced back to the end of the 2nd century and the beginning of the 3rd century. Considering the Old Testament prohibitions against graven images, it is important to consider why Christian art developed in the first place. The use of images will be a continuing issue in the history of Christianity. The best explanation for the emergence of Christian art in the early church is due to the important role images played in Greco-Roman culture. As Christianity gained converts, these new Christians had been brought up on the value of images in their previous cultural experience, and they wanted to continue this in their Christian experience. The first converts were Greeks. They therefore embodied Christ at first as a pagan god. For Christ the Good Shepherd, who was not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel, in Matthew chapter 15, verse 24, there were two familiar classical figures which might serve as prototypes, Hermes Kriophoros and Aristeas. Hermes Kriophoros, as the protector of cattle and sheep, is represented carrying a ram upon his back. Aristeas, the son of Apollo and the nymph Cyrene, was worshipped in ancient Greece as the first cultivator of the vine and the olive. He possessed the arts of healing and prophecy, and averted destructive forces from the fields. They both planted an important in Christian symbolism and became popular Christian literary work of the 2nd century. Now let's dive into our sarcophagi. The first one we will look at is sarcophagus of Junius Bassus. Junius Bassus was a member of a senatorial family. He was a Roman prefect in around mid-4th century. He was responsible for the administration of the city of Rome. When Junius Bassus died at the age of 42 in the year 359, a sarcophagus was made for him. As recorded in an inscription on the sarcophagus now in the Vatican collection, Junius Bassus had become a convert to Christianity shortly before his death. The style and iconography of this sarcophagus reflects the transformed status of Christianity. This is the most evident in the image at the center of the upper register. Before the time of Constantine, the figure of Christ was rarely directly represented, but here on the Junius Bassus sarcophagus, we see Christ prominently represented not in a narrative representation from the New Testament, but in a formula derived from Roman imperial art. Early Christian art reveals two competing conceptions of Christ. The youthful, beardless Christ, based on representation of Apollo, vied for dominance with the long-haired and bearded Christ, based on representations of Jupiter or Zeus. Christ in here is more represented as youthful with the kind of naturalism and movement to his body, and his goddess foot above the head of a bearded, muscular figure who holds a billowing veil spread over his head. The figure can be identified as the figure of Caelius, or the heavens, who signified Roman authority and its rule of everything earthly. His position under Christ's feet signifies that Christ is the ruler of heaven. This shows Christianity surmounting the old polytheistic traditions of the ancient Romans, using the iconography of ancient Roman pagan art in a new Christian context. The lower register directly underneath depicts Christ's entry into Jerusalem. This image was also based on a formula derived from Roman imperial art. The Adventist was a formula which presents the formal arrival of the emperor into a city. It conveys the significance of the presence of the emperor in the city. A relief from the reign of Marcus Aurelius illustrates this formula as he returned to Rome from his northern campaign. In including the entry into Jerusalem, the designer of the Junius Bassus sarcophagus didn't just use this to represent the New Testament story, but with the Adventist iconography, this image signifies Christ's triumphal entry into Jerusalem. The next one we will take a look is a sarcophagus from the Church of Santa Maria Antigua. This dates to before the time when Christianity was made legal in the Roman Empire in the early 300s. And as we know, early Christian art borrowed many forms from pagan art. As you look at the male philosopher type that we see in the center of the Santa Maria Antigua sarcophagus is easily identifiable with the same type in another 3rd century sarcophagus, but in this case, a non-Christian one. The female figure beside him, who holds her arms outstretched, combines two different conventions. The outstretched hands in early Christian art represent the so-called orant, or praying figure. This is the same gesture found in the catacomb paintings of Jonah being vomited from the great fish, the Hebrews in the furnace, and Daniel in the lion's den. As we move along to the left side of the sarcophagus, Jonah is represented sleeping under the ivy after being vomited from the great fish. The pose of the reclining Jonah with his arm over his head is based on the Greek mythological figure of Endymion, who wished to sleep forever, and he became ageless and immortal. Explains the popularity of this subject on non-Christian sarcophagi. In both their style and iconography, the Junius Bassus sarcophagus and Santa Maria Antigua sarcophagus witnessed the adoption of the tradition of Greek and Roman art by Christian artists. Rather than rejecting the classical Roman tradition, it became a recurring element in Christian art throughout the Middle Ages. And this art developed into a more abstract, simplified artistic expression. Its ideal was not physical beauty, but spiritual feeling. Although the production of Christian sarcophagi started only towards the end of the 3rd century, later than catacomb painting, the many surviving examples give a good impression of the development of early Christian imagery.